All right, in this video we're going to pick up where we left off from the previous video on solving rational equations. So example 1D, we have 1 over x squared minus x plus 1 over x equals 5 over x squared minus x. So let's factor what we can, and the x squared minus x factors as x times x minus 1. So looking at our denominators, we definitely don't want x to equal 0, and we definitely don't want x minus 1 to equal 0. So we don't want x to equal 0, and we don't want x to equal 1. So those are our two forbidden values in this problem. Looking at the denominators themselves, our least common denominator for this problem is going to be x times x minus 1. So if we multiply everything on both sides by x times x minus 1, for this first fraction, we have the x and x minus 1s are going to cancel. We're just going to have the 1 left over. And then add to that, the x's will cancel. We're going to have 1 times x minus 1. So we'll have 1 plus just the x minus 1, because this x and this x will cancel each other out. Over on the right-hand side, 5 over x times x minus 1, when we multiply that by x times x minus 1, the x times x minus 1s are going to cancel out, leaving us with just a 5. So combining our like terms on the left, we just get x equals 5, and that's okay because it's not 0 and it's not 1. Moving on, part E, we have 1 equals 2 over x squared plus 2 over x plus 1. Well, factoring what we can, in our denominator for x squared plus x, that factors as x times x plus 1. So we definitely don't want x to equal 0, and we definitely don't want x to equal negative 1. So looking at our least common denominator, we have both of them have an x plus 1s. This one also has an x, so our least common denominator is x times x plus 1. So we're going to multiply everything on both sides times by x times x plus 1. Well, 1 times x plus 1 is just going to be x times x plus 1, or x squared plus x. And then over on the right, 2 over x times x plus 1, the x times x plus 1 is going to cancel out this x times x plus 1, leaving us with just a 2. And then the x plus 1 in this denominator is going to cancel out the x plus 1 here, leaving us with 2 times this x, or 2x. So clearing out the fractions, we get x squared plus x equals 2 plus 2x. Well, we have a quadratic equation. We want to get it equal to 0, so let's subtract 2x from both sides and then subtract the 2, and we're going to get x squared minus x minus 2 equals 0. This is factorable. It factors as x plus 1 times x minus 2. So if we set each factor equal to 0 and solve it, we'll get x is negative 1 or x is 2. Now, in the beginning of the problem, we stated that x cannot equal 0, nor can it equal negative 1, because we'd get a 0 in the denominator. So this negative 1 is an extraneous solution, meaning our final answer is going to be just x equals 2, because again, we can't have a negative 1 for x. That would cause a 0 in the denominator, and that's no good. So final answer for this one is x equals 2. All right, part F, we have 1 over 3x minus 15 equals 1 over x squared minus 2x minus 15 plus x squared over 3x squared minus 6x minus 45. Wow, that was quite a bit. So let's factor what we can. And 1 over 3x minus 15 factors as 1 over 3 times x minus 5. X squared minus 2x minus 15 factors as 1 over x minus 5 times x plus 3. And then the x squared over 3x squared minus 6x minus 45, we can actually factor a 3 out of this denominator. We'll get x squared over 3 times x minus 5 times x plus 3. So looking at our denominators, we have x minus 5 and x plus 3. We don't want either of those to equal 0, so we don't want x to equal 5, nor do we want x to equal negative 3. As far as our least common denominator goes, notice these two denominators have a 3 out in front, so that's going to be a part of it. And then each one of them has an x minus 5, and then some of them also have an x plus 3. So our least common denominator is 3 times x minus 5 times x plus 3. Now, in order to have enough space to write this across the slide, I'm going to have to look at each one individually. So first, multiplying the fraction on the left, the 1 over 3 times x minus 5, by our least common denominator of 3 times x minus 5 times x plus 3, the 3's will cancel out and the x minus 5's will cancel out. So over on the left-hand side, we're just going to have 1 times x plus 3, which is just x plus 3. Then on the right-hand side, when we multiply each of these fractions on the right by our least common denominator, 1 over x minus 5 times x plus 3, when we multiply that by our least common denominator, the x minus 5 and the x plus 3 will cancel out. So we're going to have 1 times 3, which is 3, and then x squared over 3 times x minus 5 times x plus 3. When we multiply that by our least common denominator, the 3, the x minus 5, and the x plus 3 will cancel, and we'll just be left with x squared. So clearing out our fractions, on the left-hand side, we're going to have the x plus 3, and then on the right-hand side, we'd have the 3 plus x squared. Or here, I just switched them. So let's get everything equal to 0. Subtract x from both sides. Subtract 3. We get x squared minus x equals 0. We can actually factor an x out of this. So x times x minus 1 equals 0. So for this one, we get x equals 0 and x minus 1 equals 0. So our two answers of x are x equals 0 and also x equals 1. Neither of which are a 5 or a negative 3. So we're clear on that one. All right, that about does it for this video. Thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.